Hi everybody, we're just gonna give it a couple of seconds to let everybody in. But in the meantime, I can just say that I'm Carolina. I'm a developer at 46 Elks, and I'm gonna go through this workshop with you guys. So I might have taken too many things and pushed it into one tiny little hour. So I'm gonna be speaking quite quickly, but hopefully you can keep up with the tempo. And in case you have any questions, or if I'm going too fast, or if you need me to go back in something, just give us a shout out in the chat, and Sanna and Nina will let me know that I need to go back and show something, or stop and pause or explain something. But I also have Sanna with me from Mimmit Koodaa, and I also have a co-worker with me from 46 Health. Do you want to say hi, Nina?
Yeah, hi, I'm Nina, and today I'm a helping hand for Carolina. And I'm from Finland, so I can speak Finnish as well if someone needs some help in Finnish. Kiva, että näin moni on tänne löytänyt tänään ja onnea matkaan workshopissa. Good luck.
And I also speak Swedish, English, and Norwegian. So if anybody wants to ask questions in those languages, that's totally fine as well. I'm gonna try and share my screen. Let's see here. Desktop. So this is what we're going to go through today. So this is the workshop page at Mimmit Koodaa, but we also have I've arranged for a 46 Elks workshop page where I have a couple of steps with code and other things that we're going to go through. So I'm going to send that in the chat to you guys. And we're going to go into this page as well. So everybody do that in your browsers. So I've sent it in the chat for you guys. So first I want to ask you if you want to follow along in this workshop, have you downloaded the POSTman client, as it says here? And have you created a 46 Elks account if you don't have one already? A couple of you maybe were in the last workshop, so maybe you already have a 46 Elks account. But if you don't, then you can get one at this link as well. And then we're going to use a live server. So if you want to log into the live server, then you can send an SMS with your name to this phone number, and you should get login credentials for that server. But we're going to go through everything together, so it's totally fine that you don't know what everything means right now. First of all, I like to ask the question because I actually answered this one wrong a couple of times. But I like to ask the question, does anybody know what the word API stands for? So in case anyone knows, please unmute or write in the chat if you know what the word API stands for. Is it anyone? Oh, right. Here we got in the chat, application programming interface. Exactly. And as I said, I've answered this incorrectly myself during an API workshop that I was having for people. But to me, application programming interface, it doesn't say very much. It doesn't explain to me what an API actually is. So that's what we're going to talk a little bit about, and we're going to use an API in two different ways. So today we're going to use an API without code, and we're going to use it with code, and then we're going to use it with PHP code. And at the end of this workshop, hopefully we will have gone through all of this. So we're going to talk a bit about URL, request, response, status codes, get and post. We're also going to be using Vim, and we're going to be using the terminal. And we're going to use PHP as a code language today. And we're going to talk about different formats as JSON and XML, for instance. So first of all, I'd like to talk a little bit about the theory about an API so that you can understand what it actually is. Because as I said, application programming interface, yeah, what does that mean? But when, why and when to use APIs. So APIs, for instance, you can use to open up access to data. And what that means is there's a lot of data around us as people, as a planet, as companies, as this community, for instance. There's a lot of data around all of us. And the data might be held in tax authorities, in governments, in companies. The data is stored in different places. And previously, before APIs been around for a while, but before API was a standard to use, then you might have had to, if I wanted to access data about the forest, then I had to call the government in Sweden for forest or nature, and I had to ask them about a report with data in, for instance, an Excel file. Oh, I'm sorry, that's my cat. But I might have to call them and ask them to send me a file with data. And they send it as an Excel file on email. And if I wanted to use that data, I had to upload it to my website. And that was a very manual process. But nowadays with APIs, then you can use the data in real time. So for instance, if you have a weather app, then SMHI has a lot of data about the weather, and I can create an app or a web page about weather, and then I can access their API and I can do a GET request, get real-time data about weather all of the time. And then we also have with APIs, we have automation access to different systems. So for instance, an example of automation with APIs is if you book a dentist appointment. And in Sweden, when you do that, the day before your appointment, you always get an SMS that's saying, oh, remember you have a dentist appointment tomorrow. And then I remember it and I go to my dentist appointment. But there is no one at the dentist office that's sitting there and sending SMSs manually. That's all done with automation. So it's done with, you've connected an API to the dentist data, and then they extract data from the calendar. So they know when to send out an SMS from the calendar appointment that I have at my dentist office. So the API is accessing data and it's doing post requests with the data. And then we also have layer on top of complexity that you can use with APIs. And that basically means that, for instance, banks have a lot of different systems. Banks have been around for ages. So if you have a specific bank that might have been started for 40 years ago, then they have different systems that's been added onto or developed further, and they have like different systems that connects with each other. So they have old systems that are, the new systems are dependent by the old ones, for instance. And as a bank, you can never stop working. So they can't shut down one system because it might be dependent on a whole other systems. So instead of developing another system that connects with all of these complex systems, then you can actually place an API on top of all these complex systems. And then you can instruct the API to go in and fetch some data and do something with that data. So that's a way of saving time and money for banks, for instance, but that's also a way of using APIs. You can just place it on top of an already complex system of different things and code bases and stuff like that. And you can instruct the API to just fetch and do something with a couple of data points. Is that clear to everybody, or does anybody have a question regarding this? Sorry, I'm just gonna let my cat out actually. So, sorry. Why and when APIs and where to find APIs. So there's a lot of different APIs out there today. It's enough to just Google API and, for instance, recipes. If you want to use recipes with an API, you can find a lot of different APIs. But here's a couple of tips on which different kind of APIs are out there. So the Swedish authority, the digital authority, DIG, it's called Myndigheten för digital förvaltning. They have created dataportal.se, and that's a portal where you can find different APIs. So if you just go on there and you search, for example, nature, you can find a lot of different APIs with data about the nature, and you can get them post requests and you can find the data. And then you also have something called, in Sweden, we have Trafiklab, and they have tried to gather all of the different traffic APIs out there. So we have a lot of different systems for traffic in different regions in Sweden. And they have gathered all of those APIs. So there are a different, if you just Google APIs, then you find like instances of APIs, but you can also find these gatherings of APIs as well, where you can find just the API that you're looking for. So there's a lot of APIs out there. And now we're going to use API in a practical way. So if you have downloaded POSTman, please take up POSTman. And if you have gone into this URL in your browser, then we're going to use that as well. And this URL that I sent you in the chat, and URL is basically in its basic form, it's an address. It's a home address out on the internet. So if you go to an URL to that address, then you're going to find the information on that URL, exactly as we're doing now. We have entered a URL in our browser, and then we find all of this information on this home address out in the internet. And we're going to do exactly the same thing in POSTman. So you copy this URL, and then you get up POSTman. I'm gonna do that as well. Hopefully you can see POSTman now. Please, if it's too small, then I can just make it larger. So please tell me if it's too small. So you post the URL and then you access that in POSTman. So we paste it in POSTman. I'm actually going to need to make it a bit smaller. Like that. And then we're going to press the button send. And when we do that, there's a lot of data down here. So we get an answer in POSTman. And the answer that we get is a whole lot of HTML code. But this is not the way that the website looks in our browser. It looks a bit cleaner, and we can actually see the information that we want to see. But if we go back to our browser, and I have Chrome as a browser, so I can just right click and then I can click Visa sidkälla, or view, I think it's called view source. Then we see exactly the same answer in our browser as well as we do in POSTman. So what we did in POSTman now, there was that we were doing a GET request to a URL in POSTman. And on this URL, there's data. It's a website, so it's made up of HTML and it's made up of CSS, for instance. And that's the answer that we see in POSTman. And what we do in our browser is exactly the same. We're entering to a URL and we're getting a response that is actually made up of HTML and CSS. But this looks way prettier than this looks. But exactly the same thing as we've done now with the website, that is exactly the same thing that you do with an API as well. So every API out there has a URL out on the internet. So every API has a home address out on the internet. So we're going to be using a different URL now, but I also want to say this to you as well, that look in POSTman and you will see a status that says 200 OK. So we're going to come back to status codes, but just look at the status code each time that we do a request to a URL, and you will see different status codes. So what we're going to do now in our browsers is that we're going to access 46elks.com, and we can do it like that, and we're going to go into doc. And I can send this to you in the chat as well, so you have it. So what we've done now is that we have accessed a different URL, and this is the 46elks.com/docs/overview. And in here, we're going to find the base URL of our API. So 46elks, we have an API, and to our API, this is the base URL. So this is the base home address of 46elks API out on the internet. We're going to copy that, and I can send that in the chat as well. We're going to copy that, and we're going to enter that in POSTman as well. So we paste that in POSTman, and then we press send. And now we're getting a different status code. So now we're getting a status code that says 401 authorization required. And we can also see a bit more information here. We're not getting the same response as we did before. So we couldn't access the data that's on this URL at the moment, because it's saying that we need to authorize ourselves before we can actually access the data on this URL. So it says API access requires basic HTTP authentication, read documentation or examples. And for every API out there, it's often some kind of instructions to that specific API. So exactly as we have on our API, we have done like an instruction manual over our API. We're saying that if you want to send an SMS, this is how you do it. So we instruct everybody how to use our API. And often it might be called different things. So it's not always called the documentation. It could be called API docs or API documentation, API manual, API reference manual. And sometimes there's like small APIs and they might not have a documentation yet. But if they don't have a documentation, then you can reach out to the people that have created the API and you can ask them questions, for instance. So if you need an instruction manual, as it's saying that we do now, we need to read the documentation or examples in order to understand what are we supposed to do now when we get this status code. But if you can't find an API documentation, or if you can't find how to access the data on this API, it's also worth mentioning that you can learn about the APIs. You can learn about status codes in a different way. So status codes, that's something that you get as an answer from an API. And often with status codes and you're accessing data in APIs, often you're just listening to an answer that says 200 OK. And if that happens and you have gotten the information that you need and your code is doing something with that. But it's also good that you listen to different failed status codes. So there's a lot of different status codes out there. And this is my favorite website. It's called HTTP Cat. I can send that in the chat as well. So on here, you can find all of these different status codes. So we're gonna find the one that we got now. So we have 401 on authorize. We're not allowed to go through that door. That door is locked. So we've entered a URL, a home address out on the internet, and when we try to access that, the door is actually locked. So we can't get through. So we're going to need a couple of keys to unlock the door and get in that door. So if you're uncertain about status codes, this is a website where you can always check for different status codes when you're using APIs. But what this one is actually saying is that we need to authorize ourselves before we can use this API. And there's 4 different groups of status codes that's good to know about. It's 200 something. That's okay. You have gotten the answer that you can get. Then it's 300 something. And it's here, but it might be somewhere else. You might not have the right URL, but it's around here somewhere. And then you have 400 something, and that's something went wrong here. Just as it did for us in POSTman, you need to do something else in order to access the data or do something that you're trying to do. So you can read the documentation. Or 500 something, and that's actually, oh, sorry, it's our fault. We have done something. It might be that a server has disconnected or something. So it's on us. We apologize, and you can try a bit later to see if it's working. So that's 4 different groups that it's good to know about. Sorry, it feels like I'm talking really, really fast and a lot. Please ask questions in the chat in case you have any. So what we're going to do in order to authorize ourselves and use our keys to open this door is that we're going to go to this tab that's called authorization. And we're going to click here and we're going to click on basic auth. So we're going to do a basic auth in order to unlock this door. We click on that. And here it's saying that we should enter our username and our password. And what we're trying to do now is that we're trying to use the 46 Säll API. And we need to insert our username and our password. So if we go on to our 46 Säll account, see here. Oh, right, I have to do this. I have my passwords. So if we log on to our 46 Säll account, it's not the same username and password that we were using when we were logging on to our account. That's a different one. So when we get asked, when we're trying to use an API, and when we get asked to insert a username and a password, that's often not the one that you log on to the actual service with. It's actually something different. So it's called API credentials, or it could be called API keys, for instance. And I'm gonna show you here. Here it's called the API credentials, and you see it's called username and it's called password. And that's always a bit confusing, but API credentials or API keys are often made up of a long string of characters and numbers. You will know what an API credential or an API key is because they look vastly different from the username and password you insert to get into this account. So what we're going to do is that we're going to paste this, and we're going to, I have apparently already cheated, I'm sorry for that. And here you saw that I got a different characters in my username, so I'm gonna fix this. This happens sometimes as well. And then we're going to copy the password, and we're going to paste that in there as well. And if anybody doesn't follow now, please ask questions in the chat, and I can just go back and show these steps again. And when you have entered the username and the password, then you can try and press send again and see if this works. For me, it worked because I got the status code 200 OK, which means that you have authenticated. And it actually says it here as well. Hello there, you authenticated correctly. So hopefully that worked for you guys as well. And if it didn't, sometimes it's a space somewhere that you need to look at. It might be in the username, or it might be in the password. That has happened to me several times as well, so that's totally fine. Oh, it worked. Perfect. I'm glad. Lovely. So what we're going to do now is that up to this point, we have only done get request. I've mentioned this a couple of times. We have only done get requests in POSTman. What we're going to do now is that we're actually going to send something. Up until now, we have only been fetching data or information. We've only done get requests, and now we're going to send something away. And what we do then is that we're going to do a post request. So you have get request to get data, and then you have post request to post or send information or data. We're going to change this in POSTman. We're going to change it to post. And on here, because as you can see here, we have only used the base URL to our API now. And you can see here, read documentation or examples for further information on how to use the platform. And what that means is the base URL in itself, that can't really do anything. You need to enter what we want to do. And with our API, you can do different telephony things. So you could send SMS or send MMS or make phone calls. So we're going to add something that is called an endpoint to instruct the API on which kind of way do we want to use this specific API. So if we wanted to make a phone call, then we can just write calls and we would make a phone call, for instance. But what we want to do today is that we want to send an SMS. We're going to add an endpoint that is called SMS, and then we're instructing the API that we want to do something with SMS. So if we're doing a post request, we probably want to send an SMS. So I can post that in the chat as well. Hopefully that is working for everybody as well. So what we need to do now, you could be looking at the documentation, but you are in a workshop and I've done this before, so we're going to do it together. So what we need to do now is that we need to add the information that we want to post. So in an SMS, then when you send an SMS from your phone, you're writing a message, you're sending it to someone, and you're sending it from someone. So those are the three parameters that we need to add somewhere in POSTman in order to actually send an SMS. So we're going to click on this tab called body here in POSTman. And then we're going to click on a specific format that is called XBDF form URL encoded. It's a very long name. But we're going to click on the tab body and then exit via form URL encoded. And here we're going to enter all of these parameters in order to send our actual SMS. So here you can see it says key and it says value. And down here it says key and it says value again. And actually, if you worked with JavaScript before, you might have heard key value pair. So key and value, that's a pair. Those two always go together. And what it actually means is that key, that's sort of a headline that is saying something, and then the value is storing the information about that key or that headline. So it could be, for instance, that it could be address is the key, and my address is Ljusvaregatan 10. Yeah. So, so that, for instance, could be a key value pair. That the key is the address, and then the value is the address itself. But what we're going to add is, as I said before, we're going to add to, from, and message to be sending an SMS away. We're going to add to, and then we're going to add the phone number that you're going to send the SMS to. And my phone number is 6703855. So we need to enter the country code before. So for Swedish phone numbers, it's +46, and for Finnish phone numbers, Nina, it's 358.
Yes, 358.
Yes. Finally got it. So what you need to do if you have a Finnish phone number, you need to add +358, and you remove the first 0 in the phone number. And then you have your phone number. You could be sending an SMS to mine if you want to. And then we're going to add the from parameter as well. We write from, and then I write workshop here. And then we have one more key, and that's message. What are the message that we want to send in our SMS? I could say we are live in a workshop with Mimmit Koodaa. So that's the message that I want to send. And if everybody has entered this in POSTman, then we're going to press send once you're done. And let's see what happens. Hopefully you will get an SMS. I press send. And what the answer I get in POSTman is that I get a JSON format answered, where it says status created, rich and outgoing. I get these all different answers in JSON. And in this answer, you can see that it also contains the parameters that we just entered in POSTman. So it says from, and it says to. It actually says how much it costs to send an SMS, and these are 1,000 parts, so it's actually not 4,500 crowns. And then you have the message that we were sending as well. And every SMS gets a specific ID as well, so it knows what is this message, what does it contain, who is it sending to, who is it sending from. So hopefully now you should have gotten an SMS. Does that work for everybody? Please write in the chat if it doesn't, and we can have a look at it. Success, and yes, worked for me. Oh, I'm so glad. It's something specific with like getting that aha experience for me. You're using a program on your computer and you're sending an SMS to your own phone. To me, that's like, it's still pretty cool. And I've been doing this for 2 years now, so hopefully that worked for everybody. And in case it didn't, you can just ask questions in the chat and we will help you out. And you can also be looking at this recording in case you think it's going too fast. You can look at this recording and you can be pausing in between, and you can retrace your steps as well in the recording. So what we're going to do now, we have just sent an SMS without any code, and I promised in this workshop that we will actually be sending an SMS with some code as well. So we're going to use a PHP code to do exactly the same thing that we've done now. So this is just a practical thing that we're going to do. So if you have sent an SMS, as I said up here, if you have sent an SMS to this number, you should have gotten your login credentials for a live server that we have for this workshop. And we're going to be using that to run the PHP code on. Because if you're going to code something in PHP, you need to actually be able to run that PHP code. And if you have a different way of running PHP code, that's totally fine as well. Then you just tag along and you do that in your way. But if you don't have a way to run PHP code on, then you can use this live server. I'm going to use that one as well. So that's what you will be seeing. We just got an answer in the chat. This is weird and mysterious magic, but it works. And I couldn't agree with you more. It's so weird. You can do things with code and it actually just works. Not all of the time. Sometimes you scratch your head and get frustrated by code, but often it works and then it's just pure magic. So what we're going to do now is that instead of using, oh, sorry, I'm gonna shut this down. So instead of using POSTman, now we will be using the terminal. So if you have used the terminal before, please get that up. I'm gonna switch around a bit here so I can see that. And I'm using a Mac computer. So my terminal, it looks like this. Your terminal might be looking a bit different, depending on what kind of computer you're using. And if you have a Mac computer and you haven't used the terminal before, then you can just use the keys command and space bar, and then you get a way of writing and searching for things, and then you can write terminal. And if you're using a Windows computer, it could be called, the terminal could be called command prompt or PowerShell, for instance, on your computer. And if you're using a Chromebook, then you might have to have Linux on that in order to access the terminal. So if you can't get the terminal to work now, then you can try that on the recording later. But for those who can get the terminal to work, then we're going to log on to this live server. So I've actually cheated a bit. So I've added my username and password for the live server. So I'm gonna copy and paste that from my phone. See here if I can do this. Like that. And I'm going to add that here. So what we're going to do is all of the information that you got in the SMS, if you sent one and you got a login to the server, it might not make sense in the beginning. You just get a lot of information in an SMS and it doesn't say how you're going to use it. But we're going to be using it in the terminal. So we're going to add, you can see here on the instructions, we're going to add SSH in the terminal. That's a way of logging in. That's a secure way of logging in. And then we're going to add the information that you got in the SMS. We're going to replace username with the username that you got in your SMS. And mine is Carolina5018. And then we're going to add a at. and then we have the actual URL to this live server. So that's what we're cooking together, and we're going to access our live server with this information. We press enter, and then we get asked to enter a password, and you should have that in your SMS as well. I have it on my phone here, so I'm gonna try and copy that. Like that, and I paste that on my computer, like that. So if you get this text in the terminal, that means that you have logged on to the live server. And a way of testing that is that you can write ls and you can press enter. And that will list everything that's in your folder on this live server. And for me, it lists something because I've tried a different couple of things on this server. So I have some things on the server. But if you do ls, then it should be empty for you because you probably don't have anything on your folder on this server. So hopefully that works for everybody. Oh, we got an answer here. Dollar sign is not recognized as an internal or external command of the power badge. Oh, sorry. So what might have happened then is that this dollar sign, that's just an indication of this is something that you're going to write in the terminal. So that dollar sign, you don't need that dollar sign. That should already be in your terminal. So if you remove that, yeah, thank you. Now it works. Perfect. So when you have logged on to the server, in order for us to actually run the PHP and instruct the server that it's PHP that we want to be using on the server, we need to start PHP on the server. So what we can do then is that we can copy this snippet of code. So we copy that and then we enter it on our live server. And before you press enter now, then you're going to change this to your port. So you got in a specific port in your SMS, just as I got in 5018. So I'm going to change it to 5018 because that's my port and you have a different one. And then I press enter. And then we get an answer that it's not a very good answer, but this answer actually means that we've started PHP on the server. So any files that we have on the server with PHP, it's now running on the server. And in order for us to quit PHP on the server, it actually says here, you can just press Control and C to quit running PHP on the server. And then you get this little squiggly thing that says, now PHP has stopped on the server. So that's a good way of testing it before we actually do something. But in order for us to create the file and for us to be sending an SMS with PHP code, we have cheated a bit here. So it's like cooking on live television. We have already created the recipe and we have made some preparations here. But this is what we're going to be using in order to actually send an SMS. We're going to be using some snippets of code. So in order for us to create a new file, I'm going to be using Vim. If you have a different way, if you use some other way in order to create files, that's totally fine as well. But for me, it's Vim. That's my terminal kind of code editor that I use. I'm going to providing Vim, and then I write send hyphen SMS and .php. So what this means is when I write Vim, I'm starting the code editor in the terminal that is called Vim. And the things I've written after that is send hyphen SMS .php. I'm naming a new file, send SMS, and I'm saving after PHP, I'm saying this is a PHP file. So the server knows what kind of file it is. If we were creating a website, we can enter .html, for instance, and we have an HTML file instead. Once you've written this, you press enter, and now we get a completely empty new file. And in this, we're going to copy all of this code, and you have a little button here, so you can just copy that. And then you go over to the terminal, and in order for us to actually write something in Vim, you have to press I for insert mode. So down here, you can see that it just says send SMS PHP new file. But when you press I, then it says insert. Now we are in insert mode in Vim, and now we can add things in the code. So we just paste the code here. It should look like this once you're done. And here we have a couple of things that we actually need to change in order for us to send the SMS that we want to send, because this is just like a dummy example. So what we're going to do is that we're going to change the username and the password up here. And that is exactly what we did at POSTman. We already have that here. We have the dashboard here. And then we get the username, and we're going to add that here. Like that. And then we have the passwords. We're going to do the same thing there as well. But now you all can see my password, so I'm going to change that afterwards. Like that. And then we also had the 3 parameters that we were talking about before that we entered in POSTman. So we have the who are you sending the SMS to, and who are you sending the SMS from, and what is the actual message that you're going to be sending in the SMS. Those 3 parameters, the key value pairs, we need to change those as well, so we can send the SMS that we want to send. So here we're going to change the from parameter. So I can say workshop. And we're going to add a phone number that we're going to send the SMS to. So for me, that's +46 70 385 385 5735. Sometimes it helps to say it in Swedish. And then we're going to change the message as well. And we're going to say send SMS with PHP. So when you have changed this is everything that we need to change. We're going to save this file, and then we're going to start PHP on the server, and hopefully then we are going to send an SMS. So that's what you need in order to make those changes in the code. And then you need to run PHP in order to actually do the post request. So everything we're doing now, it's exactly the same thing that we did in POSTman before, just that we did it in POSTman without any code. And now we're doing the same thing, but we're doing it with PHP code instead. So in order, when you're using Vim, in order to save and quit the file, you need to press escape first, and that takes us out of insert mode. And then we write :VWQ. So you can see down here that I'm writing :WQ, and that means write and quit. So we're saving, and then we're going out of the file. And then you just press enter. And if you do ls now on the server, then you can see that you have a new file that's called sendsms.php. And that file has all of the code that we have entered and we have edited. So now we're gonna check what the next step is. So now we're going to start PHP on the server, and we go up a bit and we can copy this again. So we're going to start PHP on the server. So this is what we enter, and we press, oh, sorry, we need to change the port, of course. So I'm going to change it to 5018. That's my port, and you have a different one in your SMS, and we press enter.
Carolina,
is it working? Yeah.
Did you see the question on the chat?
No, sorry, I didn't. Hi, my copy paste doesn't work, even though I have the file in insert mode, and I'm using Control plus C, Control plus C. Any tips on how to copy the code? Oh, if Control C and Control V doesn't work, do you have a Mac computer? Could it be Command C and Command V? Can you try that and see if that works? No Windows, then it should be Control. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm actually not sure. Sometimes shortcut doesn't work in terminal. Try right click on. Ah, that's a good way of. Okay, and it didn't work. Oh, it didn't work. I'm gonna think about that, and hopefully we can find an answer. So I'm just gonna complete this step, and then we can. Then I'm gonna have a think about it, and hopefully we can find a solution for you to copy and paste the code, or otherwise write the code. But that takes a bit of time. So we're gonna come back to that question. So we will make it work for you, Maria. For everybody else that copy paste is working for, hopefully you have gotten to this point where we have started PHP on the server. And what we need to do then, because when we are running PHP on the server, that means that we actually have created a URL on our own that we can access now to view the file that we have created on the live server. So what we're going to do is that we're going to copy this URL here. We copy that and we enter that in our browser. But before you press enter, you're going to change this to your port number. So 5018 is mine. And then I press enter. And what we're doing now, you can see this in the terminal. What's happening now is that the server is registering all of the traffic that's happening on the server. So when we go onto this URL, we're triggering the server and we're triggering the PHP code on the server. So that should be sending an SMS. So if this works for you, hopefully by now you should have gotten a SMS on your phone, because we've entered the URL and that makes the code actually works. So it sends an SMS. So I'm gonna check on my phone if I got an SMS. And yes, I got it. Perfect. And somebody has actually sent an SMS to me as well. This workshop is kanonbra. Thank you very much. Lovely. So does this work for everybody except Maria? We're gonna find a solution for you as well, but does this work for everybody else? Please unmute if you want to say something as well, or write in the chat. Oh, Maria, it worked. Oh, so you got a lot of good suggestions here. My Vim doesn't save. Maria, have you tried escape before you do the write WQ? So press escape to get out of insert mode, and then you should be able to write :WQ. Does that work for you, Maria? No. I'm gonna see here. What kind of computer are you using? Windows. Let's see if it says something specific here. It's up to you to save the file and exit the editors to solutions, press escape to switch to normal mode, type W:WQ and hit enter. Another command to save a file and quit bin is :X. Can you try that? Does that work for you, Maria? We're gonna see if that works. Sometimes bin is a bit tricky if you've never used it before. After escape, nothing happens. That's peculiar. Let's see, press escape to make sure you're out of the editor mode and then try it. Yeah, doesn't know that already. Maria, do you have time to stay after we've stopped the recording? Then you and I can just share screen and have a look at it. Perfect, great. So we're gonna find a solution for you as well. For everybody else, does this work with the code? Is it possible to get access to the live server after the workshop too? I've never got a reply to my SMS. Yes, the workshop live server, it will be here after the workshop as well. So we're trying to clean out all of the accounts after 6 months, so we don't have a lot of code that's on there. So if you want, you can access the live server and you can test this on your own quiet at home, and you can watch the recording and you can pause it and you can do a lot of different things on the live server. But if it's some kind of code snippets you actually want to save, remember to save that on your computer locally as well, because we are going to clean out the accounts after about 6 months or so. So what were the steps to get the PHP script to run? PHP host port, and then just said, sorry. So if you want to run the actual code, this is what you need to do. In the terminal, you need to copy this snippet, and then you change your port to your port. So you copy that and you change your port, and then you enter this URL and you change it to your port as well. So this is the URL that you're going to access in the browser, and that will trigger the PHP code to actually send an SMS. So how to use your API in the work environment? In what context do you use it and who is using it? Oh, Nina, I think I will need your help here to come up with the example. We have so many different users. We have people that's trying that is doing hobby projects, for instance. So I was talking to one user quite recently that had like an IoT thing. He had a sensor in his cabin out in the forest. And if that sensor that the water was below a degree, that it was freezing, then that will be sending an SMS to his phone saying that, oh, it's way too cold in your cabin. You need to go there and fix the heating, for instance. Nina, do you have any examples of who's using it?
Yeah, like maybe just the basic one is that you have it in your booking system automatically, that is integrated. That when you make a booking for the dentist or doctor or something, it automatically sends a message to you.
And if you order things from web shops and the postal service is going to deliver it, then you get automatic SMSs. That's also an example. There's a lot of different people and companies, and I'm not even sure how many different use cases we have. I think it's about 4,000 or something like that. So if you want any more examples, then there are a couple of customer stories on our website where you can see what a couple of our customers are using the API for. Some are also using calls or sending MMS, for instance, as well. Do we have any more questions? I'm amazed that I actually gotten all of this information in just an hour. So if you have any questions, I have time to stay because I was afraid that it was going to be a bit longer. Oh, I got the message. Perfect, you got it to work. Great. How many of you got it to work? Thumbs up. We need a part 2 and part 3. Please have Carolina teach more of this. Thank you so much, because this is actually, I've never done this sending SMS with PHP code as a workshop before. So thank you so much for liking it. I was a bit nervous. I love one of how to build your own API, not just calling, reading, maybe API. Perfect. I would also want to learn how to create their own API. Hopefully I'm actually taking a Python course right now with PyLadies in Stockholm. So I'm learning to code Python, and hopefully that will enable me to code my own API. So hopefully when I've done all of that, I can also show you guys how to code your own API, because actually at the moment I have no clue on how to do that. Thank you all so much for being in this workshop and for helping me test this out. I got stuck. Do I need to quit from the server? You can have the connection to the server as it is right now if you have the time to keep trying. And I have time to stay. So in case it's any of you that like Maria or like Carolina that has gotten stuck somewhere in the code, we can just be here in the Zoom meeting. Hopefully, Sanna, is that okay? That we stay a bit in the Zoom meeting? Oh, you got it to work, Maria. Lovely. Thank you so much, Maria, as well. So if it's anybody that doesn't got it to work, I have time to stay. So if it's okay for Sanna, we can stay in this Zoom meeting, and otherwise you can just send me an email. Here's my email address in the chat. So it's carolina@46x.com. Please send me an email and we can just meet up like this and we can have a look at your code and see what's happening. Thank you, Emilia, as well. More of these days. Thank you so much. I get so excited. So are there any more questions? Maybe I should stop sharing my screen actually. It seems like it's it's no more questions, but if you have any, please reach out. My email is in the chat, and I think also my contact details are on Mimmit Koodaa's website as well. And Mimmit Koodaa can also give me the questions if you can't remember the email. So thank you all so very much.
Yes, thank you all. Yes, thank you.
How do you say thank you in Finnish? Is that kiitos?
Kiitos.
Kiitos.